Brought to you by the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education and the SLOCO Arts Collaborative.
Hi, welcome back to Reading Sheet Music with Kat. Today we're going to go deeper into the intricacies of reading sheet music. First, we're going to put together some of the knowledge that we've learned in the previous videos, and then we're going to go deeper and explore keys and what that means.
Meow.
Before we get into new material, let's do a quick review of the last two videos. Here are some cheat sheets from the last videos for your reference. Here we have pictures of all the kinds of notes we have discussed thus far. There is the whole note, a half note, quarter note, eighth note, and 16th note. We have our whole note, which is a circle that is not filled in. We have a half note, which is a circle that is not filled in with a stem. The quarter note, which is a filled-in circle with a stem. The eighth note, the filled-in circle with a stem with a little tail on it. And the 16th note, which is a filled-in circle, stem, and two tails. And here are all the proportions of the notes side by side. If you recall, I advised you to learn these notes as proportions rather than individual values. It will make your life easier as you enter into more complicated time signatures. At the top, we have a whole note, the largest individual note we deal with. If we ever need a longer note value, we just tie multiple notes together. Below our whole note is a half note. A whole note is worth two half notes. Next, we have quarter notes. It takes two quarter notes to make a half note and four quarter notes to make a whole note. Below, we have eighth notes, where two eighth notes equals one quarter note. Another way to think about it is that one eighth note is half of a quarter note. There are 4 eighth notes to a half note and 8 eighths notes in a whole note. And last for us, but not least, are 16th notes. It takes 2 16th notes to make an eighth note, 4 16th notes to make a quarter note, 8 16th notes for a half note, and 16 16th notes to make a whole note. Let's put it into perspective. If we assign the quarter note to 1 beat, our half note is worth 2 beats, and our whole note would be worth 4 beats. In the other direction, if our quarter note is 1 beat, an eighth note is worth half a beat, and the 16th note is 1/4 of a beat. Alternatively, let's assign the eighth note to 1 beat. If our eighth note is 1 beat, a quarter note is worth 2 beats, a half note is worth 4, a whole note is worth 8, and a 16th note is worth half of a beat. The time signature tells you at the beginning of the piece how to break it down rhythmically. The top number tells you how big your measures are going to be, how many beats are going to be in each measure, and the bottom number tells you which note is worth 1 beat. You have to think of the bottom number as the bottom number of a fraction. So if there is 4 on the bottom, 1/4 is a quarter, so a quarter note gets a beat. If there is an 8 on the bottom, 1/8 is an eighth, so an eighth note gets a beat. Or if there is a 2 on the bottom, 1/2 is a half, and so a half note gets 1 beat. Or if there is a 16 on the bottom, 1/16 is a 16th, and so a 16th note is worth 1 beat. And here is how we read different pitches on the staff. We have 5 lines and 4 spaces. In treble clef, our lines from the bottom are E, G, B, D, and F. The 4 spaces are F, A, C, and E. Regardless of whether the note is flat, natural, or sharp, the notes live in these places. In bass clef, the lines are G, B, D, F, and A, and the spaces are A, C, E, and G. When we have notes that go too high or too low for the staff, we use ledger lines to orient ourselves. Here is a review of some notes using ledger lines. As you can see, they continue our pattern of alternating space and line notes, just with a teeny little mobile staff to help keep us oriented. To a certain degree, you won't see more than 3 ledger lines being used unless you play the violin or the piccolo. In fact, to avoid ledger lines, a composer will often write a section of music under a bracket and then notate 8VA or 8VB to indicate that the aforementioned passage should be played a whole octave higher or lower. That would look like this. If the bracket is on the top, it will say 8VA. Here is an example on the left. Were I to write that passage with ledger lines, it would look like the measures directly to the right of that. If there is a bracket on the bottom, it will either say 8VA or 8VB, but either indicates that the passage is to be played an octave lower, as seen in these examples. And here are the notes on the piano. We have patterns of 2 black notes and 3 black notes alternating for the full length of the piano. Every time you have 2 black notes, the note directly to the left is going to be C. And then you just count up the alphabet. We have C, D, E, F, G, and then we're back to A, B, C, D, and so on. The black notes in between are either the sharp of the note to the left of it or flat of the note to the right of it. For example, the leftmost black note on the screen is either the sharp of C or the flat of D. Whether we use the sharp or the flat name for this note depends on the context. We typically use the sharp name of the note if we are ascending or going up, or we use the flat name of the note when we are descending or going down. Sometimes we use only the sharp name or only the black name when we're in a specific key, but we will talk about that a little bit more later. So far, we have gone through rhythms and notes separately. Now it's time to put them together. All right, let's do an example. What if this was the first measure of a piece? How would we go about breaking this down? The first thing we would do is look at the time signature. It says 4/4. Do you remember what that means? We have 4 beats in every measure, and the quarter note gets 1 beat. In this example, we have 3 quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, and 1 quarter rest. When we break down a rhythm, especially when we're learning, it helps to write the beats underneath. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 is this note, the 2 is this note, the 3 is this note, and the 4 is silent. Make sense? Each one of these notes is 1 beat because a quarter note is worth 1 beat, and this is our quarter rest, which is also worth 1 beat. So each one of them gets their own beat. Let's speak this rhythm on the syllable la. So it's la, 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 rest. Let's do that together on repeat a couple of times. La, 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 rest. La, 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 la. Good. Now we'll put in the notes. What note is this? Do you remember? This is an E. I'll write that up here. It's perfectly okay if you need to use a cheat sheet if you don't have this memorized yet. Now, what about this note? It's 1 lower than E, so it's the note that comes just before E. So if we think about our alphabet, what comes before E? D. This is going to be a D. Boop. And we'll do that one more time. This is 1 note before the D. What note comes just before D? Okay, what letter comes before D in the alphabet? C. So this is a C. So we have E, D, C, rest. So this whole measure goes like this. E, D, C, rest. E, D, C, rest. Let's do another example. What about this measure? First, we'll look at the time signature again. This example has 3/4 as our time signature. Our quarter note gets 1 beat, just like in 4/4, but this time there are only 3 beats per measure. Now, let's look at our rhythms. This is a little bit more complicated. We have 2 eighth notes, 4 16th notes, and 1 quarter note. Let's write our rhythm underneath. Because our eighth notes are each worth half a beat, this would be 1 and. And because each of our 16th notes is 1/4 of a beat, this would be 2, E, and A. And then we have another quarter note with it, which is a whole beat in and of itself. So that would be our 3. So that would sound like this. 1 and 2, E, and a 3. 1 and 2, E, and a 3. Do that one with me. 1 and 2, E, and a 3. So that's our rhythm. Now, let's read our notes. What's this note? This one is our 3rd space note. That's going to be a C. How about this one? This is one note just before the C. This is the 3rd line, and that's going to be a B. And here we have an A, a G, an A, another B, back to A. So remember, our rhythm is 1 and 2, E, and a 3, just like that. So when we put them together, these rhythms and these notes would sound like this. La, 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 la. La, 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 la. Every song has a key. A key is a specific collection of notes that you expect to hear in a song based on where you began. The first note is the most important note, and that's also the name of the key. Like, for example, the key of A starts on A. The key of A flat starts on A flat, and etc. Here's my favorite example to help understand what keys are. Imagine your house. It's your house. There are certain people who live there who you expect to see there all the time. Maybe your mom, dad, sister, brothers, dog, uncle, you name it. These are the people at your house that you see all the time and who belong there. Of course, your house is welcome to have visitors, but it's a special occasion when your house has visitors. These are people that you would be surprised to see if you came home without previously knowing that they were going to be there. The same is true for songs. There are notes that live in the key that we expect to see or to hear based on our knowledge of who belongs in that key. That doesn't mean that other notes can't visit, but when they do, it's unexpected and a big deal. It really stands out to us. Here's an example. These are the notes that live in the key of G. If I play these notes in any order, everything sounds pretty fine and normal. But if I play this note, whoa, that sounds kind of shocking and wrong. This note is a visitor. It can come over, but you for sure notice in a way that you don't notice any of the other notes as being unusual or strange. All the notes of a key are presented to us in a scale, which is all 8 notes of that key played in order. Think of it kind of like a mini alphabet song. We start with whatever the name of the key is, and we play until we arrive back at that note in a different octave. Like if we start on C, we'll start our scale on C and play all of the notes in our C scale until we arrive back at C. There is always one of each note in a key. A C of some kind, a D of some kind, an E of some kind, an F of some kind, a G of some kind, an A of some kind, and a B of some kind. Which version of the note, as if it's flat, natural, or sharp, depends on a pattern of whole steps and half steps. And most of the time, we don't mix sharps and flats together, especially when we're talking about keys. Sometimes in the wild, in different musical compositions, we may see flats and sharps together, but not in a scale. So sharps stay together and flats stay together. They can visit each other as much as they want, but they don't live in the same key. For our purposes, we have two overarching categories of keys. We have major keys and minor keys. Within these categories, we have a few different scales, and we'll go over all of them. First, we'll start with major keys. These ones are the most straightforward. A major scale sounds like this. A lot of people associate major keys as sounding happy, cheerful, or bubbly. And a major key is comprised of this pattern of whole and half steps. Remember what we said earlier about the difference between half steps and whole steps? Using this knowledge, let's figure out a few keys together. Let's start with C major, a very good place to start. Here is C on our piano. Now our pattern is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Last video, we learned that every note on the piano is a half step away. So, knowing this, what is a whole step away from C? Since a whole is two halves, we go up two notes to get to D. Next, we have to go another whole step, which is E. Now we arrive at our first half step in the pattern. Because there is no black key between E and F, a half step up from E is the note F. Then we have a whole step to G, a whole step to A, a whole step to B, and then we finally arrive at our second half step back to C. So as you can see, we figured out that there are all white notes in the key of C, and therefore all natural notes. There are no sharps or flats. This key of C is often considered the go-to key for this reason. We don't have to worry about sharps or flats. Let's try another key. How about G major? So we'll start on the G this time. If we refer to our pattern of whole and half steps, our next note is a whole step away. What is a whole step away from G? A. Then we need another whole step. That will bring us to B. Then we have our half step, which brings us to C. Another whole step to D. Another whole step to E. And here's where it gets tricky. Our pattern says we need another whole step next to E, but this note doesn't have a black note in between it. So what do? E to F is a half step, and we need another half step to make a whole step, so we have to go up to F sharp. And then we get one more half step, which brings us back to G. Do you see how we did that? Unlike our C major scale, which had only natural notes, our G scale has mostly natural notes, but one sharp. F sharp. In this key, F natural does not belong. The F sharp is the version of F that belongs here. So listen to that all together. Ah, perfect. Very nice. Let's do one more example. How about A major? So we start on the A, and we go up a whole step to B. Then we need another whole step. Just like we did in the G scale, because there's no black note in between here, this is a half step. And because we need a whole step, we go up to this black note, which is C sharp. And then we get our half step, which brings us to D. Another whole step to E, another whole step back to that F sharp again, Another whole step, which takes us to this G sharp, and then a final half step that brings us back to A. Suddenly, we have way more sharp notes. Do you remember which ones they were? We had F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. It's super important that when we play or sing a song in the key of A major, the type of F, C, or G that we play is the sharp version. So listen to that all together. Beautiful. Let's do one more example, but with a flat key this time. If you're having a hard time remembering if there will be flats or sharps in your key, take a hint from its name. Flat keys will always have a flat in their name, like E flat, B flat, A flat, C flat, and so on, with one exception. If there is no flat in its name, with one exception, there will be sharps, like G, D, A, E, etc. And our exceptions will be C major, where there are no sharps or flats, and F major, which is actually a flat key and has one flat in it, the B flat. Both of these examples are still subject to our major scale whole half pattern, but if you're trying to deduce whether or not a key has flats or sharps in it by the name, these two will confuse you. So let's try finding the notes of the B flat major scale. We're going to start here on our B flat. Let's refer to our pattern. We want to go up a whole step next. So we move 2 half steps. There's our whole step, B flat to C. Then we go up another whole step to D, a half step to E flat, a whole step to F natural, a whole step to G natural, a whole step to A natural, and a half step back to B flat. So in the key of B flat, we have a B flat and an E flat, and the rest of the notes are natural. Listen to that. Once you have the formula figured out, it's not so much of a mystery which notes are in each key. They all just follow a very specific pattern. Let's move on to minor keys, which get a little bit more complicated. If major keys sound happy, minor keys literally sound sad. It's a good way to tell the two apart if you're just using your ears. This is what a minor key sounds like. We have two different types of subcategories for minor keys. We have parallel minor and relative minor. A simple way to differentiate them is to remember a relative minor has the same notes as its relative major key, but it starts in a different place. A parallel minor starts in the same place, but uses different notes. Make sense? Think of it this way. If someone is related to you, they might look different, but have similar genes to you. But if you bump into someone who looks just like you, but isn't related to you, their genes are going to be completely different. Relative minor is the most common type of minor. It has all the same notes as its major key, just in a different starting place. The relative minor starts 3 half steps down from its relative major. Let's do an example. Let's start with C major. What is C major's relative minor? So we'll go to C, and we'll go down 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. Where are we now? A. So the relative minor of C major is A minor. An A minor scale has the exact same notes as a C scale, just starting and ending on an A. If you remember back to a moment ago, we found out that C major is our key that has all natural notes. A C natural, a D natural, an E natural, an F natural, a G natural, an A natural, and a B natural. Knowing this information, we can construct our relative minor scale. Starting on A, we'll play all white notes. A natural, B natural, C natural, D natural, E natural, F natural, G natural, and we'll end back up on our A natural. Let me play all those notes all together. Can you hear how that sounds super different from a major scale? This minor scale sounds really sad by comparison. Hear them side by side. Here's the major. Happy, cheerful, nice. And here is the minor. Let's find another relative minor. Here is a G major scale. This key has all natural notes except for one. The F is sharped. Knowing this information, let's find the relative minor. We'll start on G and go down 3 half steps. What do we get? E. So the relative minor of G is E minor. Like G major, E minor is going to have all natural notes except for F sharp. And we're going to start and end on an E. So let's try that. Let's listen to them side by side. Here's your major. And your minor. Parallel minor is deceivingly difficult. Unlike a relative minor, we begin this minor scale on the same note as the major scale. For example, the parallel minor of C major is C minor. However, we then have to figure out which notes are in our scale. In order for us to find out what notes the C minor scale has, we are required to first find the relative major of C minor. So do you remember how to find the relative minor when we know the major? We go down 3 half steps, right? So when we want to find the major from the minor, we just reverse and go up 3 half steps. What is 3 half steps up from C? Let's find out. 1, 2, 3. E flat. Now, let's use our pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half to find which notes are in our scale. We start on E flat. A whole step up from E flat is F. A whole step up from F is G. A half step up from G is A flat. Did you say G sharp? In one way, you are correct. This note is called G sharp, but if you remember to the beginning of this section, flats and sharps do not go together in a key. So because we're in Flat City right now, this note would be considered A flat. Let's keep going. What's a whole step up from A flat? B flat. A whole step up from B flat? C natural. A whole step up from C natural? D natural. And last but not least, a half step will get us back to our E flat. Did you catch all that? As a review, the key of E flat major has E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, and E flat in it. Therefore, the key of C minor will also have all of these notes just starting on the C. So the C minor scale looks like this. C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and then back to C. So the C minor scale looks like this. C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and back to C. Another way to think about it, if it's easier for you, is to think of minor scales using their own half and whole step pattern, similar to the way we figured out major scales. The minor scale pattern is going to be whole half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. We can, just like the major scale, use this pattern to find any minor key starting on any pitch. Need to know the notes of C minor? Use this pattern. But I find using the whole and half step patterns to be more work than they need to be personally. I will show you the way to find the notes of the scale that I like better in just a little bit. But I think it's important to at least understand how these scales are constructed. So that's it for us today. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully this was more instructive than confusing. And stay tuned for my 4th video.
Brought to you by the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education and the SLOCO Arts Collaborative.